Mittie's first train ride. On Tuesday, November 5th, 2019, at 8:20 a.m., I began my first train ride, going from Greensboro, North Carolina to Washington, D.C. Now, one understandably might ask, how is it, or why is it, that Mittie Moore Smith is just taking her first train trip at her age? It is not necessary that you know my exact age in order to understand or appreciate this story. The fact that I'm older will suffice, but I will say that I'm above 50. But knowing the how and why is the crux of the matter. So I will tell them to you, but they occurred a long time ago and once upon a time. So travel back with me to a little southern town in the northern part of Florida called Madison. I grew up as the youngest of 9 children, raised by my daddy and older sisters and brothers after our mother's death when I was 4 years, 4 months, and 3 days old. We did not take vacations or travel much at all when we all were young and at home, except to go to Valdosta, Georgia to go to an eye specialist starting my first grade year. But after graduating from high school, my older siblings left Madison, as almost everyone did at that time, due to lack of employment opportunities in Madison. And after my siblings got settled, they would have me to visit with them. Okay, you're saying, so you had the opportunities to travel, to take trips. Plus, you have traveled during your adulthood, so why no train trips? But here's why. You see, my daddy would allow me to visit my siblings during the summer school break, no matter where they lived, but they had to drive to pick me up and to return me, or arrange for someone to pick me up and return me by car. Then the summer before my senior year in high school, my oldest sister Juanita, who is also like being my mother, intervened. Her husband was then in the Air Force, stationed in Hampton, Virginia, but he was away out of the country that summer. My sister asked my daddy, and he agreed that I could go to Hampton, Virginia, but under the usual conditions of travel. My sister agreed. I had never used any form of public transportation. However, my sister had decided that it was time and I was able to venture out some. She told me that we would take advantage of our daddy's out-of-town work schedule of leaving Madison on Sunday nights and returning on Friday nights. So I would leave on a weekday and would travel alone from Madison by my choice of either bus or train, and she and I would return by airplane because she would need to be present to explain to our daddy why she had not driven down to pick me up as she had indicated to him that she would do. Prior to my going to Hampton, my brother Isaac had gone there by bus, so I decided that I would go by bus. Therefore, in the matter of 1 month's time, I had traveled by bus and by plane. Oh, when my daddy was told about my travels, he was calm and accepted. We didn't know if that was because it was a done deal or if for whatever his concerns had been about me traveling had not been borne out, or a combination of those plus other reasons known only to him. You know, I was neither a dumb nor stupid kid, so I to this day do not know why my daddy took such a position about me traveling. Also, it now occurs to me that neither I nor my siblings ever asked him why, and he never said. He stated what the terms and conditions were for me to visit, and we all accepted that as final and conformed our actions to them. I finished high school, and all of my traveling during college was either by car or bus, primarily by car. Then, immediately upon graduation from college, I flew to Chicago, Illinois to get married, and since that time, my traveling has been all modes of transportation, except by train, until Tuesday, November 5th, 2019. Our marvelous son had planned this trip for me and my husband in honor of our 50th wedding anniversary 2 years ago, but had to call everything off in December 2017 due to extremely bad weather, and in December 2018 due to my serious illness. The primary purposes of this trip were for me to experience the train ride and for us to go to the African American Museum. To our great surprise and pleasure, he never gave up on the idea. especially the 50th anniversary celebration part. Our son gave me a closed gift box with the instruction that it was not to be opened until I was on the train. To those of you who have been riding the train for years, you probably are saying, "So what?" And I truly understand that view. But I found that I had the excited expectation as you probably did when you took your first train ride as a kid. Our train, I almost said our flight time, was 8:24 a.m. on Tuesday, and I was awake at 2:30 a.m. and could not get back to sleep, so I stayed up doing some household chores until time to go. A special thanks to my husband and son who gave in to my nervous need to arrive at the train station quite early. So we got there before 7 a.m. And yes, we were the first people there for our train time. It allowed us time to look at the refurbished station that had been done in the beautiful old style of train stations. We checked in and I intermittently sat and talked and walked around the waiting room looking at and reading old materials. On one occasion, I turned to return to where my husband Ronald and son Ron were seated, and to my surprise, I saw our friend Willie Coleman, and I exclaimed, "You're on this train too? Where are you going?" It turned out that she had come with confetti to see us off. She had on her PJs and a trench coat and would return home to her bed. She and Ron had arranged this. The train pulled into the station with several coach class cars and one business class car at the very back of the train. We were traveling business class. The train had started out from Charlotte, North Carolina, and so there were not many people in business class on a Tuesday morning. The seats were large and plush with lots of leg room for my husband. That one car had 2 restrooms. All drinks were free and there was a hostess. There had not been any stops between Charlotte and Greensboro, so the train arrived and left on time. It did not linger at the station. It was to be my observation all along the way from Greensboro to Washington, D.C., that the train does not linger at any station. The train ride was extremely relaxing, and though I dozed, I think more because I had been awake since 2:30 a.m., I did not sleep long and deep. I also did not read the book and magazines that I had packed. I spent the time looking at the scenery, even though we were traveling where the train tracks are, primarily in the countryside. It was a real relief to pass over busy highways and not be in the vehicular traffic, especially in or leading into the cities. I thought that with the rail tracks being so smooth, that the ride would always be smooth. But there were jerky and rattling times, but not enough to adversely affect the ride and my opinion of the experience. Our son had even packed us some fried chicken for the train ride, though he didn't include deviled eggs and pound cake, nor did he pack them in a shoebox, as were the habits of travel during my childhood. Thank goodness for the chicken, because the train company takes advantage of having a captive audience, and so they price their food items quite high in the dining car. Ron, the chicken was delicious. Thank you, Ron. I wanted to know if and how coach and business class differed, so I walked the entire length of the train. There are differences. The seats in coach are closer together and they appeared smaller, but still the seats were bigger, plusher, and farther apart than those on an airplane. Immediately, one noticed that the air in coach smelled different due possibly to the fact that there were so many more people in coach, and most of them appeared to have brought on much more luggage and other baggage that was not checked. Because Ron paid for the trip and I failed to ask him or the station agents, I do not know the difference in the fares for the 2 classes, but I was glad that my first train ride was in business class. Thank you, Ron. We had an unscheduled stop of about 1.5 hours on our way to D.C. that was due to a track being repaired. That was not nice, but not overly concerning because we were in no particular hurry. We kept John Settles, our friend and pickup person, informed so he would not spend unnecessary time waiting at the station. And it occurred to me that no matter what, we were on the ground and not in the air, circling as we would have been under similar circumstances if we were flying. Like my daddy used to say, You can't pull an airplane over in the air to fix something that goes wrong. Because of daylight saving time, it had grown dark before we got into Washington, D.C. So as we approached the city, we could see all the vehicular traffic lights on the highways going into and out of the city. It was so stress-free not to be caught up in that traffic as the train tracks were above it all. Also, it had been nice how the train kept moving in the small towns as the traffic had to stop for the train at railroad crossings. You know, over the years, I've stopped for a lot of trains at railroad crossings as I've either driven or been a passenger. And I felt the frustration or bother for having to stop, especially for a long train. I never once thought about what it must feel like being on a train and seeing everyone stop and the train keeps moving. Now I know. At first, one does not really notice or realize. But after some time, one realizes that that is a powerful thing. That is a heady stuff and calming. We made several stops along the way, and I was amazed at how relatively short each stop was and how quickly we were on the move again. So it was not bad having to make so many stops. I could not help but wonder what it would be like if there were an express train to D.C. starting in Charlotte and stopping only in Greensboro, Raleigh, and Richmond, Virginia. Our arrival and baggage claim were trouble and stress-free. And miracle upon miracle, John Settles found us almost immediately as we stood on the curb among lots of other people waiting for rides outside of the Union Station. I must remember to ask him just how he was able to do that, locate us so quickly. The train ride back was the same, except it was a Friday, and a whole lot more people were traveling, and a great deal of our trip was in the dark because we left D.C. at 11 a.m. Our son had to be in Virginia on Saturday, so he arranged to be back from Atlanta in Greensboro on Friday evening so that he could pick us up from the station. Thank you, Ron. But oh wait, before the curtain comes down, you are probably wondering about the closed gift bag that Ron had told me not to open until I was on the train. You are right, that made for a great temptation, but I obeyed. The bag was relatively heavy, so I wondered all the more, what could it be? To our great and pleasant surprise, there were lots and lots of cards of well wishes for our belated 50th wedding anniversary and our upcoming 52nd anniversary. Every card had beautifully handwritten inspiring notes. And for those who did not have time to send a card to go in the gift bag, their well wishes had been relayed to Ron, who wrote them. There were monetary gifts that we will use in a beneficial way, and Ron had put in magazines of interest separately for his dad and me, and little handheld games. And even though we knew that there would neither be space to play nor even appropriate for someone of my age to play, he nonetheless put in a game of jackstones as a reminder of my childhood and youth with one of my favorite games. I know, some of you young people hearing this do not know what I'm talking about. Thank you, Ron. So a heartfelt thank you to all of you. We appreciate everything that you have done, written, and said to make this such a wonderful trip. A special thank you, Ron, for planning and coordinating everything.